Hello everyone and welcome to my DCS World War II updates video for January 2020. Now there's quite a lot of content to get through in this video, so for the first time I've actually had to map out a bit of a contents. This is the order I'm going to look at the stuff we've learned and seen in January. I first want to take a look at the maps, and yes, maps is plural in this case. I then want to move on to some of the individual aircraft module development news. Then we're going to take a look at assets pack news, and finally I want to comment on 2.5.6, which should be just around the corner in the next couple of weeks. Included in that discussion, we will talk about the upcoming damage model. So let's get started with maps. We have two threads of map related news to discuss. One is in the Pacific and the other is in Western Europe. We will start with the Pacific. We found out in January that a Pacific map covering the Mariana Islands will be produced and released. I made a video discussing how I thought this could be adapted to suit World War II era flying. However, since that video, we now know that in fact a specific World War II version of that map will be worked on. So not only will we have the modern Mariana map, but there will be a specific World War II variant with World War II buildings and assets, I'm presuming, as well. I'm not sure how this is going to be implemented, whether the map will be bundled in with the cost of the new modern Mariana's map. I'm hoping that it will be, and that all we'll need to do to access the 1940s variant of the map would be to simply set the date in the mission editor to the 1940s, and that will give us access to a 1940s variant of the map. That would be a nice, smooth and seamless implementation. I don't have access to any real visual information about what this Mariana's map is going to look like. We have some tidbits about what the modern variant will look like. Obviously, the ocean will remain largely the same, and some of the built-up areas will need to be adapted for the 1940s Pacific period. As for release dates, we don't have any solid information about that yet. My expectation is that the World War II visualization will not be released until after the modern stuff has been completed. Best case scenario, I guess, is that they are released at the same time, but like I said, we don't know when that will be. Let's move on now to the more complicated map news for the month, and this is the channel map. I did do a short video when we first got our screenshots of the new upcoming channel map at the start of January, and we have received a second batch of screenshots right at the end of the month, which now show a bit more detail on the southeast English coast. We now have images of Dover and of Folkestone that I can make out based on geography. There are a few structures missing, such as Dover Castle and the Martello Tower near Folkestone, but overall the landform or the topography itself looks to be largely complete, and the urban and industrial areas have been added. Let's move on to some of the burning questions that people have been asking, on some of the critiques and comments about this channel map, which I want to address / discuss. Now, this is where we start getting just a little bit more controversial and speculative. One of the opinions that I've bumped up against quite a few times now, both on Reddit and on the comments to my video where we looked at the channel map screenshots, is the opinion that the channel map is simply a replication of what Normandy already does. This opinion I understand. There are geographical similarities between the two maps, and in fact, if you just open the mission editor, the extent of the existing Normandy map appears to overlap with the channel map. However, we need to really take a bit more of a sophisticated view of this before we can make an informed judgment. What I want to do here is show you an image of Dover. This is Dover as it's currently modelled on the Normandy map, and here is Folkestone, also modelled as it is currently on the Normandy map. It becomes even more extreme on the Normandy map if we just cross the channel and have a look at the Pas-de-Calais in France. This part of the world is going to form the core of the new proposed channel map, and this is what it looks like currently on the Normandy map. For the player base to then complain that the channel map is in fact an overlap of this seems to me to be highly disingenuous, because this is what we're looking at for Dover and Folkestone with the new proposed channel map. Strictly speaking, the area is included on the Normandy map. However, the Normandy map simply doesn't model this area. It has no detail. It's not a flyable or usable part of the map. And this is what drove a lot of the complaints about Normandy when it first came out. And for this reason, I think it's a bit hypocritical for the player base to complain that the channel map is in fact an overlap when a couple of years ago we were complaining about these areas not actually being present on the Normandy map. Now that said, I do agree that these two maps are just a little bit too close geographically for comfort. It doesn't really feel like another theatre or an entirely separate part of the world, which I think is what people were expecting. In fact, I was expecting or hoping that we would in fact get an Italy map. That said, I think the best way for Eagle Dynamics to implement the channel map is in fact to make it seamless with the Normandy map, to in fact merge the two maps together. This is entirely speculative on my behalf. We have absolutely zero indication from Eagle Dynamics that this is what they are planning to do. However, from a customer relationship perspective, I think this would be a very, very smart move to in fact merge the Normandy and the channel map into a single map that extends all the way from the Cotentin Peninsula all the way up to Belgium and potentially parts of Holland, and including the North Kent coast. So whilst I can kind of explain the two maps existing side by side, I'm not 100% behind the decision to have two maps. And like I said, I'd love to see them merged together. I have about a 1% hope that that will in fact happen, and I'm only hanging that hope on some comments that Eagle Dynamics have made in the past about in the future working towards some kind of global map years and years down the line. It is my very, very slim, sneaking suspicion that knitting the Normandy and the channel maps together may be a test case for Eagle Dynamics to see whether this is possible and feasible. However, that is total speculation on my behalf. I'd love to see it happen, but in all honesty, I don't think it will. As with the Pacific map, we don't have an indication of release date for the channel map. The screenshots indicate that development of some parts, particularly Southeast Kent, are coming along quite nicely. We don't really know how much work is being done in France, Belgium, and potentially Holland. So for the moment, I think we can just hold off our expectations. I would not expect the channel map to be released in 2020. Let's move on to flyable aircraft, and there are three flyable modules I want to discuss. We have the Corsair, we have the P-47, and we have the Mosquito. By far the most newsworthy of these three has been the P-47. There have been quite a few rumblings and noises from Eagle Dynamics about the P-47 during January. We've seen some additional screenshots, and this module is looking like it's coming along quite nicely indeed. On the 31st of Jan, we received in the weekly newsletter a nice image of the P-47 cockpit. So this is from the position of the player sitting inside the cockpit, and most of this cockpit, possibly all of this cockpit, looks now to be complete. What I really like about this is that the instrumentation is luminous. and we have a beautiful shadow across sort of a diagonal line across the cockpit. And the right-hand side of the dash is in shadow, and you can see the luminous instruments really showing up nicely, providing contrast against the darker background. And then on the lit section of this image, the luminosity is much lower, but it's still there. And this creates a really nice visual image of how the lighting is looking in the P47. This is quite advanced in terms of, I think, the development program. And in fact, this is further along than we have in some other modules, such as the Spitfire, where the instruments remain non-luminous even today. A couple of other screenshots of the P47 from the exterior have also been posted throughout the month. This module is looking pretty advanced now, and I think we can expect to see this released possibly in early access in the first half of the year. On the other hand, news on the Mosquito has been very quiet. There was a brief mention of it in one of the early newsletters in the month, basically reminding the player base that the Mosquito was going to be released after the P47. For me, I think that means that we will be lucky to see the Mosquito in 2020. Development news on the Corsair during January was also pretty much absent / very light indeed. We had a major showcase of the Corsair flying in December, but since then we haven't really heard much more. I imagine that Magnitude 3 / Leatherneck are just quietly beavering away on that project. In the background, we tend to get updates from them on a quarterly basis rather than monthly or weekly. We did, however, get some interaction from Hiramachi, who is strongly suggesting that they are going to work on a Zero, a mid to late war Zero, which will be the first Japanese aircraft released for DCS World War II. Certainly there's going to be an AI variant, and it's strongly looking like a flyable module is in the plan for the future. But it is very, very early days in terms of development of that, so I really wouldn't put too much of your time into thinking about how, what, when and where that's going to be in your greasy little mitts. Time to move on then to the assets pack. We're getting quite a lot of news now about the assets pack. This was supposed to have been updated mid last year. The update for the assets pack then got pushed back to August. It is now Q1 of 2020, and we received a very solid indication from Ego Dynamics that Q1 2020 would be the release for the World War II assets pack update. There is now 8 weeks left of the quarter. I'm starting to wonder whether they will make the third time revised deadline. However, we do have some really, really lovely screenshots of the work that is forthcoming. The JU-88 looks amazing. It looks very, very detailed, far more detailed than even the B-17, which is already in the assets pack. We've got some lovely shots showing this aircraft carrying and releasing torpedoes. This is only going to be an AI asset, but this will open up a whole lot of marine operations in support of these JU-88s or intercepting these JU-88s. We also have screenshots of some of the land assets. I really want to talk about the Searchlights. Coming up with 2.5.6, which we'll talk about later, will be a revamped night environment, and here we see Searchlights in action. They don't look perfect, but we do know that Ego Dynamics are still working to improve the look of the Searchlights, and I'm really hoping that as you fly through the beam, that they will light up the cockpit and potentially blind the pilot to a degree. Yet to see if that's actually going to be implemented and how that will look from the player's perspective when you fly through the beam. I'm also very interested to see that these assets will actually have some functionality. They won't simply be eye candy, and Nineline has said as much on the forums. So these Searchlights will do something. I'm hoping that they link to the flak units and that they improve the accuracy of flak units at night. I want to see flak and Searchlights also implemented on the Allied side. The Allies also made wide use of Searchlights, so hopefully we'll see these for both Allies and for the Axis. One of the other assets which we've never seen before, and we saw our first renders of in January, is the V1 flying bomb. I am also hoping this means we will get the ramp structures where these bombs were released from that we can place in the mission editor. I'm also hoping that they accurately model the explosive qualities of this weapon. My understanding is that these flying bombs could be shot down. However, the range of the weapons used on the aircraft during the Second World War meant the pilot had to get within a couple of 100 yards or 300 yards of these things to shoot them down, and that the explosions when these things blew up mid-air actually threatened the attacking aircraft from that kind of range, which is why the method of flying up next to them and tipping the wing over was developed. I would love to see a damage model sophisticated enough to account for that in DCS, so that we have to choose whether we shoot these things down or we try and fly up next to them and tip them over with our wings. This will obviously require a rewrite of the overall collision modeling. Most people know that in DCS, if you just touch something, stuff blows up. They're going to have to model the forces and the impact of forces more accurately so that you can slide up next to these things and gently tip them off course. I expect that sort of interaction between these assets and the player might be something that isn't available when these assets are first released. In mid-January, we also got an updated list of some of the units, possibly all of the units that are going to be included in the assets pack. I'm going to run through these just quickly with a couple of comments. Most of this stuff is known to the player base for some time. Obviously, we've got the Ju-88 on its way, alongside the A-20 and the C-47 on the Allied side. These are all twin-engine medium aircraft. We have the Centaur Churchill tanks on their way, as well as the Elephant self-propelled artillery gun, the Stug 3 and the M10 tank destroyer units. We're also getting some new Allied anti-aircraft, 3.7-inch gun, a 37mm, and the M45 Quadra mount, which will be a nice addition. So that will round out the Allied flak, basically bringing the versatility of flak that the Germans have to the Allied side as well. That is most welcome. We're going to be getting the 88mm flak 41 gun. Rounding out the list are a few more German units, the Flakscheinwerfer 37 and its generating support unit. This is the Searchlight that we've already discussed. There's also the Schnellboot Type S100 E-boat and a Type 7 U-boat, which will be the first submarine in the World War II assets pack. A couple of other bits and pieces that were mentioned as well. The torpedoes, which we've already discussed as part of the Ju-88, and paratroopers, which are currently missing. There has been a mod for paratroopers produced in the past by the player base, and now looks like we'll be getting some kind of paratrooper functionality as part of the official assets pack. Let's move on to the final item of the update, and this is about the general progress of DCS version 2.5.6, which is slated for early February. So we should be seeing this within the next couple of weeks. This update is pretty wide-ranging. For me, the most interesting is the revamped lighting, in particular the night lighting. Although we don't really have World War II night flying capable aircraft, this might signal that Eagle Dynamics are starting to work in that direction, and it makes me wonder how capable the Mosquito is going to be when it comes to night flying, eventually when that aircraft is released. Next to the lighting updates and the general updates that tend to come alongside a major patch for DCS, we also may see the first elements of the damage model included in the 2.5.6 release. It now looks like the damage model release is going to be somewhat staggered, and that the effects will be released over a couple of stages. This is, I guess, somewhat disappointing. This damage model has been delayed a number of times now, but to be honest, I will happily get my hands on whatever I can, and I'm very keen to see how the damage model changes the way we interact with the AI assets and with other humans in DCS World War II going forward. The 190 A8 Focke-Wulf Anton received some changes to its ammunition counts during January. Eagle Dynamics did explain why they did this in the thread. I'll put a link to the explanation in the description below. That is the bulk of it for January of 2020. I'm sure I missed a few things. It was quite a list to work through this month, and the feast seems to be moving rather fast at the minute. I hope that was enjoyable and informative. I'll see you guys online. Just one last couple of comments before I finish. First of all is that a few months back we started the World War II/Vintage DCS subreddit. This is called r/DCS Vintage. If you are interested in discussing vintage warbirds related stuff on Reddit, I'll put the link to that sub on the screen now. It's a pretty small community at this point, but we're looking to grow it over time. Secondly, in January, Storm of War World War II Historical Server was launched on a pretty much permanent basis. We've had a few people coming through the server already. I'll be putting up some more videos of flying on Storm of War, and we're hoping for more people to get involved, particularly those who fly on the German side. There are plenty of players flying the Allied aircraft on the server. A few more Germans would be most appreciated. Finally, an addendum which I forgot. I'm currently working through the Big Show campaign on the channel. For the final video of that campaign, I will be doing a giveaway of a Reflected Simulations campaign. So if you're interested in receiving a campaign for free and entering to win that, make sure you watch the final video of the Big Show campaign, which will be mission number 12. I expect that to be out in February. Thanks everyone for watching. As usual, happy hunting. I will see you up there.